This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A conversation with outgoing Superintendent Kriner Cash tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. We are joined tonight by Dr. Kriner Cash. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Also joining us, Bill Dries from the Memphis Daily News. Dr. Cash, thanks for coming here. You are leaving, I think, at the end of this month after 4.5, 5 years. I guess I'll start with a simple but really big question. What do you think your legacy is after this time at a very tumultuous time at the city schools?
Well, you know, Memphis City Schools is well over 150 years old. This is the last superintendent for the Memphis City Schools. So part of the legacy will be what got accomplished in that last term of the Memphis City Schools, a great, great school system with a long legacy and history. I think the greatest legacy was in a relatively short time, my administration got a lot accomplished against fault lines and against things that were critically needed to be addressed. We addressed them, we attacked them, and we attacked them on all fronts. So both academic improvements that focused on the whole child, not just on test scores, and then business reforms that were deeply needed when I first came in. So academic and business, in other words, the whole district improved, and it was set on a good and better trajectory than what I found 4.5 years ago.
And as you've gone through that process, I mean, people call you a reformer. I guess one question I have is, to you, what does it mean to be a reformer in this city, but also in America, the United States right now? So much happening that people talk about school reform. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, Eric, it's a great question. It's a hackneyed word, really. It's been used for forever. I'm a historian of education reform in this country of over the last 100 years, and it's always used. Every 10, 15 years, there's a new set of reforms. I really don't call myself that. I call myself sort of a problem solver and get in and look at what needs to be done. What's more of a medical model for me? What's the current condition of the patient? What does he or she need to reach full wellness? And then let's go to work on those areas. So I really didn't come in to reform. It's really more transform, improve the health and the condition of the overall district. And of course, children were at the epicenter. So I look at it more as an artist. It's really more of an artist that used good science to guide the agenda, reform agenda. So it's a much more broad term. I'll use a phrase that I like. It's one of my quotes, one of my favorite quotes. I like to use great quotes from great people. Michelangelo said, when asked about his great Sistine Chapel work, he said, "I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved till I set it free." And that's how I look at the children of the Memphis City Schools. You know, I saw great potential here. I see genius in them, but they needed to be carved and molded and shaped and set free. That genius needed to be set free, and that's what we did. Went to work on all aspects of what the children needed here, and I think we've come a long way with that masterpiece, but it is still unfinished.
Bill.
Dr. Cash, the other waves of reform that we've seen locally and nationally were focused very much on here's an experiment, here is a pilot program. You never talked about a pilot program during your tenure. Your phrase was always, how do we scale this up? How do we take this to across the board, all schools or a set of schools?
That's correct, Bill. I think if you thought it was good enough and was something that was in your original vision, then it should be good enough for all children. Now, you need a different skill set to be able to do that. You know, the pilot thing is more of a tentative. We got to see if it works, and there's a little bit of temerity in that kind of approach. Our approach was always bold and big and courageous, and we said we've got to get in in it because it's a messy business education, no matter how you look at it, and let's make them work. So get a lot of balloons in the air, get the right balloons in the air around what the data say, and then let's get it going for all children.
Talking about the data, we also made the transition, I think, during your tenure, and this goes nationally as well, from having these scoreboards. Here are the test results, here's the mark we set, and here's where the students were, to saying, okay, we're going to measure that, but we're also going to take note of the growth that someone makes, even if they don't meet the standards that we've set.
Of the achievement.
Right.
Yeah, and we made them stretch targets. You know, there were scoreboards and dashboards, scorecards were a big thing in the early 2000s, late 1990s. But you know, it became gamed a little bit, you know, 2 points, 2 points, 2 points, and almost anything you did, you could make some progress. We always said we want to take a bold leap, stretch targets, go beyond what we might be expected, and if you don't get to the stars, you still get the moon, it's still pretty good. So we always pushed ourselves and stretched ourselves. That's going to have to continue because one thing in Tennessee that's going on, and it's exciting, but it's a little tricky for educators, is that the standards are changing about 3 times in 5 years. And that's coming again with the Common Core state standards. So you're going to have to stretch yourself because just as you get content, maybe, we're making good growth under the Tennessee Diploma Project, for example, here comes Common Core, we're going to dip again and then have to come again. So the public doesn't normally see that, but if you don't stretch yourself and really go beyond just what the basic level of growth is, we won't stay competitive in this new era.
You talked about the changes in standards coming from the state. There's also change coming in the whole shape of the city schools, and as you said, you know, it's the end of the city schools. You'll be the last superintendent because of this merger. Do you see? I mean, what's your take on that? Where do you see the schools, all of them, going? There's a lot unsettled still, but I mean, look ahead. I mean, is the merger going to unwind some of these improvements you feel like you've made, some of the progress you've made, or do you think the merger will continue those improvements?
Well, I think it's a both and. My staff's tired of me saying it, but I always say it's a both and because it's complicated. So certainly there's some really, really critical reforms that we've accomplished in this last 4.5 years that have to continue. The first and foremost one is we've got to continue this work around teacher effectiveness. If that stops or halts in any way, we'll be set back in a bad way, and we may not get the resources again that we've gotten from the Gates Foundation, which is very significant in a time of fiscal retrenchment. We got $100 million into the district. Big deal. Got to keep it going and stay on target. So that's the first thing that has to continue. I think it will continue. The next big one that was a first things first, and it's not talked about often, but if you don't have it, it will be talked about often, and that's what we've done around the whole issue of security and safety in schools. They're a much safer place, they're much more protocol oriented, and the less emphasis on arrest, suppress, transport, and fingerprint, and more emphasis on intervention, prevention, and developing young people and getting them back on track. We've attacked gangs, we've attacked the minor incidents that kids used to get into the justice system for. We've re-diverted that and given them another opportunity. So that whole body of work, along with the juvenile justice, judge person, that has to continue, and it'll be helpful to the overall county. The health issues, you know, we knew they were kind of out there, but we hadn't diagnosed them as well as we have. You got to keep looking at the health of our children because it's a fragile population overall. So I think that has to continue. Whether it's in clinic form or not, you just have to address the whole child. If she's hungry or he can't see and has other health issues, you can't learn as well. I think that has to continue. Part of that was the before school, after school breakfast and supper program. Those things have to continue in my mind. The fiscal condition of the district, you know, we left it in really good condition. You look at the numbers, you look at our fund balance, you look at our reserves, assigned and unassigned. Good deal there. Don't mess with that fund balance and that fiscal condition. If that starts turning south, you're going to run into a problem real quick in the merged district with cash flow. So there are 4 or 5 things just at the high level that need to continue, but a lot of the others, and there's a lot, may or may not may get sacrificed in the new district.
Let me go, you brought up a lot of great points there. Let me go back to teacher effectiveness and the Gates money, and there's a quote, and I think it was from Bill's story recently, about how we all know, I'll paraphrase what you said, we all know, parents know who the good teachers are.
Right.
Kids know who the good teachers are, but the school systems don't know how to identify who those good teachers are. Was part of that...
Traditionally, we haven't been
Traditionally,
able to measure
yeah.
it, right.
How do you measure that? Critics, I think, said that, well, you were after veteran teachers. You wanted to, replace them all with new young teachers and so on. But
Not
how?
me.
Not. I know. I'm just saying. I've
The
seen
movement,
that.
that's true,
Yeah.
but not here.
How? I mean, that's a delicate balance, isn't it? I mean, you've got people who've been in the system a long time who maybe you look and say they're not effective, and we have to. They're no longer helping the school system.
Right.
How do you balance that? Bringing in new teachers, identifying effective teachers, and getting rid of teachers who aren't effective.
Yeah, I think you raise a really important point. I'm glad the opportunity to clarify, because that is the perception out and about the country, that it's all about replacing the old and literally the veteran teachers as a monolithic group and bringing in the new as a monolithic group, and new and young will beat old and veteran every day. And I don't agree with that at all. What it is for me is we weren't able to measure as well who the effective veterans are, and the new ones I felt always needed to be mentored by the really good veteran teachers. So we've been able now to call out, support, reward, and recognize our veteran teachers in Memphis City Schools. That's the campaign you see all across the city.
Right.
They're veteran teachers. Those are not new teachers. But you also need a continuous pipeline and influx of good new teachers to balance with the veterans.
And when we talk about that, I mean, again, critics, I don't even know necessarily of you, but of national critics of public education,
Right.
a lot of them will pick on the teachers' unions and say the unions are all about protecting their own. I'm going to put this in harsh, simple terms, but the unions want to protect their own. They don't care about effectiveness. They don't care about the kids. Did you see that in your time in Memphis, that the unions were more about protecting their own than getting on board with the kinds of reforms and effectiveness and outcomes that you were after?
Yeah, excellent question again, but no, not at all. Here, I really felt that we had a great partnership with the union, with the board, and with the administration. And we work together on these reforms. These reforms that you see really around the teacher effectiveness work, they've been teacher-led here. We haven't always agreed with every little down in the detail. That's a healthy tension. But we have an open door. I would talk with Stephanie, or now it's Keith. Monthly, we have our monthly meetings. I say call anytime. We try to get on the same page before we go out to the press on the critical issues. But no, the tensions have come where it's either or. In other words, the national movement is just sort of washing out the rights and privileges that teachers have had. It's a hard job. It's tough work. So I wanted it to be protection of basic rights and privileges and benefits of teachers, while we also set a tougher standard of accountability for all teachers. So I think we've had a great symbiotic relationship here in Memphis with the unions.
Bill.
In terms of the being the point man for reforms, I think you came in here knowing that there's kind of a high burn rate for reformers, even though you don't prefer the term, for people who talk about we need to push this. Is there any way around pushing the kind of reforms that you pushed and not having someone who is identified as the point man for it? And what are the risks of being the point man for those reforms? Yeah. Because the next point man is going to be a little bit different, even if he or she pursues them in a general way.
Right. I think now one thing that I did do, I made it clear who was in charge of all of this, but because I think that's important in a large, complex organization. Can't have a bunch of folks but nobody in control. But we worked with the community. We got buy-in from the philanthropic community, the business community, the teachers, the staff. Everybody bought into this teacher effectiveness work, really. Took a while for different constituents to get on board, but right now it's humming about as well as it can. Now, it's a critical tipping point. Does it go forward? How does it go forward? What are the levers to make it go forward? I think this interim superintendent is going to be key to that. I think the message has to be early and often that this is one non-negotiable, people. We all have to continue this teacher effectiveness work in both districts, because when we look in the data in both districts, even though you don't hear about it as much, the proportionate number of teachers who are effective along the new measure and those who are less or less effective along the measure, they're proportionally the same. So it means that we in the county has a vested interest. I know the state's going to continue it in one form or another. So I just think that the leadership will be aligned from governor to commissioner to local level to continue this work. May not be the same kind of voice, but it will need to be continued. And I think the board's ready for that.
When you talk about the state has pushed, Governor Haslam has pushed a whole lot of changes. I think some of you've agreed with, some of you haven't. But one is charter schools. Charter schools started as something of a pilot program. There was a cap on the number, a year and a half ago. That cap was lifted. The governor's people have made it a very big priority. So charter schools are here to stay, it seems. What is your take on charter schools? Are they, some people who don't like them say they're just, they take money out of the core programs, they take money out of the school system. People who like them say, hey, you've got independent, creative people, who are able to run their own show. What's your take on charter schools?
Right. Again, it's sort of a both answer complex thing. Bottom line, I've said it from the beginning, I'm not against charter schools. I'm for good schools. I'm for great schools. Charter schools were always supposed to lead us in innovation, in autonomy and flexibility, and lead the public schools, the traditional schools, to a higher level of thinking about how to improve achievement for all children. When they do that, that's what we want. That's what we support. I want to grow those. But there also are some very mediocre ones, and there's some very poor performing ones. And what we're getting into is kind of charter school without accountability and without, any kind of nuanced sense of that they actually are different from the traditional school. That's a danger. We'll have a littered landscape of schools that are mixed performing, but they can stay in business 10, 20, 30 years because of this fanaticism around charter school. That's just a name. You have to actually perform and do something special and different. So I'm for great charter schools, and I'm for closing poor performing charter schools.
When you talk about good schools, bad schools, and you talked a little bit before about the performance of the county versus the city. Sometimes there's focus, and some of it's very media driven, and that's our fault. That focus on the bottom schools. The schools, the statewide, Memphis has a lot of schools in the bottom 5%. It also has schools like White Station, optional program, which is probably the gem of producing a huge number of national merit scores.
That are up there.
Yeah, I mean, and so but there's this real focus on the failing schools.
Yeah.
There's a charter school model that the state is putting onto the bottom performing schools. What is the answer with that? I mean, what is the answer with schools where you've got real concentrations of poverty, concentration of parents who maybe aren't as interested and engaged? Maybe a more mobile populations that are leaving those areas, so the schools are. Yeah. What's the answer to help those kids?
Yeah, it's an excellent question as well. But let's look at what the bottom is. See, I think there often gets to be, again, these simplistic dichotomies. The bottom is low in Tennessee, period. So the bottom 5% is not much further away from the bottom, from the top 25% in terms of performance now under the new standards. Not that much different. Memphis will probably for quite some time have lower performing schools in terms of test scores. What we're after is how are children developing and growing in their overall potential as young people, in addition to the performance. We want it both. Many adults that I've met will say, I wasn't very good on tests. I didn't score real well on tests. When these new Common Core standards come, few adults in Shelby County are going to pass the 10th grade literature Common Core standard test, for example. So Memphis is going to have low performing schools in terms of tests. Now, where we're going to make gains is on the growth model. We're going to grow fast, we're going to grow quick, but will we ever be 100% proficient on these tests or 80% proficient on this test? I don't think so, not in any near-term future. So you're going to have that challenge. But what you want is it a good, solid, safe school where children are happy, they have an array of curriculum choices, and parents support and like their school. That's what we want to increase in Shelby County. Whether it's private school, public school, Catholic school, traditional school, charter school, ASD schools, they all need to be happy, solid choices for the parents and for the children. We get to there, you'll be in a real good shape.
All right, Bill.
When you came here, I think you saw a lot of problems that a lot of urban school districts have. But over the last 4.5 years, what have you seen about Memphis that and our school system that surprised you? What was unique about both the challenges as well as the opportunities here in education?
Yes, excellent question. What I see germinating now, Bill, and what really encourages me is folks are starting to take on this model that I think I help be a catalyst for. That you got to look at all of the conditions that are impacting children's development and achievement. So pre-K, I've heard more about pre-K in the last month or two, or really year, than I ever heard when I first came, or in that early part of the administration. But it's absolutely where it starts. You don't improve graduation rates in the 12th grade. You've got to start back here prenatally, and then in those first 4 years. And because that's when the brain develops 95% of its capacity. So now everybody gets it. We're all about pre-K here now. The other one is the health issues. That stunned me, the level of health issues that were here, and they weren't being addressed. So kids sitting in classrooms with all kinds of mixed nexus of health issues, they had to be addressed before you can turn to page 57 and start looking at your algebra problem. So I think that has to continue, and I think that, again, the community is waking up to dealing with the health issues.
Let me interrupt you.
All of that has to continue, to me.
It's fascinating. I mean, you people who are, again, critics in a sort of national sense of public education say, that those issues should be taken care of by the parents. Government shouldn't take care of those issues. People like you, I think, and I'll put words in your mouth, say, look, maybe, obviously parents should take care of those health issues, but they don't.
That's right.
So it's a shift in education, isn't it? We're more than about reading, writing, arithmetic. We're also about that health issue, because we do have kids who are coming in there who don't have enough food and don't have health care, and so, like you said, they can't turn to 57. Right. Is that new in your time in public education? Not just in Memphis, but in your career. Are there more kids like that, or is it a realization that the schools have to take care of kids like that?
If you go back in time, and good child psychologists, they've been saying these things forever. Parents who have multiple children, I don't care what level of the social strategy you're on, you know that if your children don't have the eyeglasses they need, or the hearing aids that they need, or aren't in, good nutrition, they're going to suffer. Their attention is going to suffer in school. So it's always been a fact. It's just, I don't think in high poverty areas, I think sometimes there's been a despair about, can you really do anything about it? Can you really do anything about poverty? And I dispel that. I say you absolutely can, and we must. It's just that the society has to get that collective good notion and jump in with it. In Memphis, you're generous. You will do that. There's great church community here and foundation. So people will give and give in to where it need, but they have to see results. And we're starting to see results now. But if you neglect those issues, I'm just telling you, you won't get the achievement levels that you really aspire for.
You talked before, one of your points about continuation as you leave and the merger goes forward. You talked about the fiscal health of the Memphis City school system on sound footing. Some people who maybe just read headlines would be surprised by that, because they'd see that for years there were fistfights between the school system and the city with where they were going to do their portion of the funding, and just constant debates about the funding. Yeah. How much of that was a distraction for you? How much, that there were lawsuits against city council, and there were, lawsuits involving with the merger, which came down to control, but also money. Yeah. So it's surprising, I think, for some people to hear you say, no, the city schools were in great financial shape, and that's important. Yet lawsuits, fighting, distractions.
That's not the connection. The connection is because we managed well. We did a great job managing. We had to roll up our sleeves and make sure that even though there is crises, even though the money was taken away, what are we going to do to manage this system more effectively and more efficiently? That was part of the headlines that we didn't see very much of in these last several years. But we've done a tremendous job keeping within our means, freezing budget lines when we needed to, and knowing that we needed to stay healthy even though we were having all these issues. So there are three big crises, or three big distractions, if you want to call them, that form a perfect storm that I had to deal with, that many don't have to, superintendents or leaders have to deal with across the country. They may have to deal with one of them, they have to deal with all three. And that is the fiscal challenges were constant. From the day I stepped on the off the tarmac, I had a city take away, $57 million or more, and then every year I was fighting that. The next one was standards changed every year. We were trying to go from worst to first in Tennessee overnight as opposed to gradually. So that's a big challenge to try to keep ratcheting up a fragile district in the first place. And then the third one was, of course, this merger. That changed and sort of affected the momentum of the reform work that we were doing here, which I thought was really moving in a fast, good paced direction. And now we had to shift energies and capital, human capital, and so forth, and do it. So it is what it is. I think we've done a tremendous job in spite of all of these three things, but there's no doubt that affected the momentum and the pace of it, of the reform work.
Well, and with just a minute and a half left, what's next for you?
Well, I'm gonna first rest, try to get 6 hours of sleep now instead of 4 hours. I'm gonna look at my personal health a little bit. I've loved Memphis. I want to say goodbye to all the people in Memphis. You've been kind, you've been gracious to me when I see you on the street. I don't know what you say when I don't see you, but on the street, everybody comes up to me and they've been very gracious, say thank you. They say you've done a great job despite a lot of difficulty. But I'm going to take a little time, and then I'm going to figure out how to get back into something that really fits what my next stage is. But I will say it was hard, losing my best friend and my long-term companion, my wife and partner. She's just the best ever. So it's been hard since then for me. So I'm going to step back and figure and spend a little more time with my kids and grandkids so that they can have daddy home a little bit more now.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your time. Appreciate the other times you've been on the show. Good luck with everything you do. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good night.